Great Wednesday. Welcome to the Healing America's Narratives podcast. I'm your host. I'm joined by my co-host. Reggie. How you doing today, Reggie?
I'm doing well, King. Always good to be here with you on Wednesday morning. And I'm showing up before you even ask me the question. I'm showing up with a spiritual energy that's working at a 10 out of 10.
And so am I. I join you in that. As challenging as it is in today's environment, where the news cycle and all that, I'm sure we get into some of those things, but just really interesting. Glad that you showed up at the 10 today as well. I know we're going to have a great show. So, with that being said, what's your gratitude moment this morning?
Yeah, so for folks who are familiar with this, with our conversations, my standard gratitude is always and continues to be I'm grateful for indoor plumbing, safe drinking water, a refrigerator with food in it, and the electricity to run that refrigerator and some other electrical appliances. I'm grateful to have a supermarket I can go to and enough money to buy some food when I want food. I mean, that alone, those basic needs put me ahead of, make me more fortunate. It's probably a better way to say it than, just 90 something percent of the people on the planet. So, and then I have a lot of books I like to read too. So I don't have a lot of luxury, but I'm grateful for I've always had my basic needs met from the day I was born through the words I'm speaking right now. Um, I'm grateful for having a mind that still seems to work reasonably well, and a body that has its aches and pains as I get older, but that still functions as it's generally supposed to as well. So everything after that, loving friends and family, um, but everything after that is a bonus. So I'm grateful for a lot.
Excellent, excellent. Well, just want to let you know that your 3D rendering of your books is kind of fading in and out in the back, so you might want to fix your lighting. No, I'm kidding. Uh, I'm grateful for myself this morning for.
It's good you were kidding, because I would have no way to know how to even begin to remedy that.
No, because they're real books. That's why, you know, I'm grateful this morning. For my life, my health, my ability to see, hear, walk, talk, stand, breathe, and have a sound mind. Another 24 hours to pursue my purpose in life. I'm grateful for the challenges in my life, because through those challenges, there's opportunity for growth and gaining more wisdom. And then I'm grateful for the opportunity to do the show with you. And I also want to say I'm grateful for, in addition to being a sound mind, I'm grateful for the ability of being a critical thinker. Today's time, more importantly than ever before, with so much news. I remember when the internet really first came out, and they were talking about how, after been out for maybe a couple of years, and they were saying how getting information from the internet was similar to trying to quench your thirst from a water hose, a fire hydrant, more specifically. Yes, it's water and it's coming out and you can quench your thirst, but it's coming out so vast and so much, it's almost impossible to put your mouth on it and get any water. And that's how I really still see the internet today, even more so with social media. Just so much information coming at you from so many different ways, so many opinions, influencers, friends, notifications, all those things. So just being grateful that even in today's landscape of just over information, I would say, saturation of information, you have a critical mind and be of critical thought. I think it's such a blessing. So I'm grateful for that. Then I'm finally grateful for just being able to continue to be fully human. So that's my gratitude this morning.
Amen.
And with that being said, what's our topic for this morning?
Yeah, so something that you and I spoke about last week, which I think made a lot of sense to both of us. So either we're on a good track here, or we're both pathological. But we've been speaking for over 3 years now, and we began speaking 3 years ago based on my 2022 book, Healing America's Narratives, which was subtitled The Feminine, the Masculine, and Our Collective National Shadow, and had a small tag underneath the subtitle on the cover of the book that says, becoming more fully human, which we have on our whatever you call the homepage that we're speaking on here. I know there's a technical word for that. And because we've been applying the concepts from the book to a lot of current events, we often spend a lot more time speaking about the current events than getting back to the soul of the book, and what it is the book has to say about the shadow of America, what shadow even means, the meanings of feminine and masculine and collective shadow. So what I'd like to do is just give a real quick overview of some of the language I just mentioned in the title and subtitle, and then you and I can unpack them one at a time and show how they're relevant today, if that makes sense. So just real briefly, here's some of the language. The word healing, as it's used, refers to coming to terms with things as they are. That's the first step in healing. If you deny how things really are, you can't heal. So if I fall out of the tree, or I'm climbing a fence and I fall, I break my arm, and I make believe it's not broken, it's never going to heal properly, because I'm denying that it's true. So by healing America's narratives, we have to come to terms with the truth of America's narratives, and there are many narratives that we can come to terms with. So that's one. The idea of shadow is simply, in the Jungian sense, is that part of us that is not in consciousness yet. It's not conscious. We're not aware of it. And if somebody were to accuse us of some trait that we have, we would deny it. We would say, no, that's not true about me. So shadow is that about which we are unaware, or that which we deny. Every human being has shadow. It's not a bad thing. It's just part of who we are. Shadow can actually be good. If I'm a very generous, helpful person, but for some reason I was raised not to brag or not to pat myself on the back, I might not own my generosity and my helpfulness. And when people say, "Oh, you're such a good person, you're so generous," I'll say, "No, I'm really not. Because I can't accept my own goodness." So shadow is not a bad thing. It's simply what we're not aware of about ourselves. People have shadow. Organizations have shadow. Nations have shadow. And what we've been speaking about is the collective shadow of the United States. Part of the conversation also has to do with developmental worldview, how any one of us views the world. And there's about 70 years now of research on developmental worldview. There are many researchers and models of it. We use a very, very accessible shorthand, 4 levels of development. There are as many as 12, depending on the research. But the 4 levels we talk about are: my worldview can be me-centric. It's all about me. The next level that's more inclusive is us or group-centric. So it's about my group as opposed to just me personally. And group can be anything from my family of origin to my religion to my citizenship to my community to my church to whatever. There are thousands of possible groups we can identify with, and we can identify with more than one group. If we graduate from group centrism, we grow into what I call all of us centrism, or human centrism, where we identify as human beings and we believe that every human being has dignity and deserves the same respect. Probably fewer than 25% of people on the planet live in that worldview. Many of us understand it and aspire to it, but we don't really live in a human-centric worldview. And then finally, there's an all that is centric or universe-centric worldview. That means I identify with all things. I recognize that I am part of the universe or of creation. So I care about rabbits and deer and bear and rattlesnakes. I care about trees and rivers and oceans, as well as other human beings and even non-sentient things like rocks. And I'll just leave it at rocks for there. And some people would even say, well, rocks also or have their own level of sentience and consciousness, which I don't know enough about to have a comment there. So and then the last two things are the masculine and feminine. I'll just mention them briefly. Generally speaking, we're not speaking about men and women here, but feminine and masculine energy. Feminine energy is that which tends to include, to embrace, to value relationship and community. Masculine energy is that which tends to be more individualistic. Rather than embracing, it tends to want to lean in and move into and penetrate. And both of those can be healthy or unhealthy. Last thing I'll say is that the collective shadow of the United States, and we have proven this and we can continue to prove it, the collective national shadow of the United States, that which this country denies about itself, emerges through an unhealthy, group-centric, masculine energy. So first of all, it's unhealthy. It's group versus group, us versus them, and it's masculine in a virtual absence of the healthy feminine. That's the nation now. There are millions of people who are healthy within the nation and who have a balance of feminine and masculine energy. But if you look at our history and our current events, our collective shadow, that which we deny, and it was in public view yesterday, day before yesterday, when the president of the United States spoke at the UN, and he just embodies all of that shadow. Just completely embodies it. So that's a brief outline of the framework of the book. And then you and I can begin to play with any one of those pieces of the framework and how they are showing up on September 24th, 2025, and how they've been showing up in the last X number of years, wherever we want to start. So I'll stop talking there.
You mean doing the rapture, how they showing up doing the rapture? Is what you're referring to?
Is it the rapture, the apocalypse? Is it Armageddon? I don't know. I get confused among all of those.
Well, again, I want to thank you for choosing a timely topic, a very important topic. And what's interesting is that, again, I often now quote you when I talk to people. I give you credit for coining the term culture givens and how important that plays a role in who we are initially. I think it's up to us as maturing individuals to get to the point where you having a growth mindset, you grow beyond that. You begin to be a critical thinker. You realize some of the things you were taught when you were given your cultural givens is not necessarily true and isn't applicable throughout life. Such things as the Easter Bunny, and Santa Claus, and you learning things like that. And you realize as you get older, that's the first things you realize that your parents lied about. When you become older and you become a little more mature, you realize that your parents are actually buying those gifts, not Santa Claus. And I mention that because within that context of the cultural givens is, again, I always want to go back now to putting everything in the context of identity and understanding that when a person, how they identify themselves being a big part of the cultural givens determines their beliefs, determines their behaviors, determines their perspectives on the world. And you can hear that even if you were to ask them, before you ask them the simple question of how would you identify yourself, they will tell you in their actions, they will tell you in their statements, they will tell you in their beliefs. And listening nowadays, just for example, and I was thinking about the audacity of, like, now the mega Republican Party, Trump's administration in particular, to really believe that, and this is the truth to me, I think the truest definition of, you can look at and see white supremacy in action, is to believe that you can define hate speech and then expect others to accept your definition of it. This is not hate speech. No, this is what hate speech is. And then, and actually expect that to be really critically thought through and debated and conversated over, as though it's like you telling me or you telling another person a comment you may have made to us Not that you would do anything that would be hateful, but for you to say, I'm going to speak my mind because I have freedom of speech, but then my mind, what I just said to you, is not hateful to you. It's like, really? I don't think that you can have the ability and the power to do that. So that to me is just really interesting that we live in a time where that's just really put now out front street. And I really would respect them better, to be honest. Not that they want my respect, but just come out and say we're doing it because we white and we can, because to play around with that and try to make up lies, and they get constantly caught in their lies and get constantly fact checked, forgetting that, you know, that there nowadays people are using the term receipts to refer to proof of you saying these things. I have video proof, I have documented proof of you making these statements or engaging in this behavior that you're denying. So let me show you these receipts. That with the internet, there's so many receipts out there that people who are particularly in the public space and coming out making comments that they made 10, 5, even 3 years ago, and now they're trying to say as though they have, even though they may have a different perspective now, trying to stand on that as though they've always felt that way. Mm-hmm. And it really shows you their lack of integrity when you can show those receipts and say, no, this is what you said in 2023. Benjamin Carr, you said this about freedom of speech then. Now you're showing this behavior now. So it really shows you where a person's integrity is. You talk about the shadow work, and that to me is how people become completely complicit. It's like they're just giving up on integrity for money, for greed, going back to the shadow elements you talked about as well, for the ability to be tapped into Trump's belief that they're going to be able to ride and benefit. And they may benefit short term, but I learned that throughout my life, and I've seen it in my 56 years of living now, that the karma police is always coming at some form of fashion. And they might not come in the context of directly to you, but it also may come in the way of how your family sees you. Like look at Elon Musk, for example, and the richest man in the world. His family, now family to him is important, but his family, most of his kids, that's why he wants more. He feels like if I go by the numbers, because he thinks logically in that context, that most of his kids don't want anything to do with him. So that's the karma police come back to him in that context, that even in your own household, you're not looked at as a great man, that this image you're trying to project. We saw that with the Kennedys. Joseph Kennedy, the patriarch of the father, his evil dealings had a huge impact on his children. And the family to him was extremely important, but he suffered through his kids for all the things he's done in his life. So karma does eventually come. And so there's a reckoning coming for where we are with white supremacy. And to me, I think it's important for me to keep telling folks when I say white supremacy, I'm talking about white identity, not white people. And I think in my mind, there's a clear distinction between the two. People who may happen to have white skin that necessarily identify as white. And I think more flowers need to be given to people who are calling that out right now. And I'm seeing so many people who may be Caucasian who are acting fully human in that context to say, no, this is white supremacy, this is racism, this is evil, this is wrong, even though they could just allow themselves to either A, sit on the sideline and do nothing, or B, try to tap into it and be a recipient of what's going on. Because it's so easy now. We see it with former newscasters like Chris Cuomo. When he was on CNN, he seemed to be, leaning more toward the left, if you want to say something politically in that context. But now that he's gone through and being rebirthed, so to speak, by right-wing podcast Patrick Bet-David, who funds him and put them on his Newsmax or his affiliate Newsmax channels or his connections through that. Now he's more leaning toward right wing. And he even had the nerve to say, January 6th, I watched this video clip, and I'm going to kind of wrap up on this point. He talked about how he was interviewing, or he had on this show, Maddie from Sateo. And he was talking about how They're going back and forth about violence and political violence and around the Charlie Kirk situation. And he said, well, we both agree, and this is a tale saying this, that January 6th was insurrection. And Chris Cuomo quickly said, no, it wasn't insurrection. And the tale said, what do you mean it's not insurrection? You said it was an insurrection. He said, no, I never said it was an insurrection. And he said you did. So they went back and forth, and he left it alone. But he created a clip of their conversation. And in his clip, he shows the receipts of the quotes that during that time frame when it happened, Chris Cuomo had said it on tweeted on multiple occasions, it was an insurrection. So just watching how people are willing to be so hypocritical, sell their integrity out, and just throw away any ounce of respectability just to try to gain favor and profit within this time, as though they don't see an end to it. It's like everyone can see there's an end to what's going on with Trump's administration. We don't know when, but we see cracks in the armor. We see people rising up, and Jimmy Kimmel being put back on TV again is proof of that. When people come together and do a collective raising of their voice or outrage by canceling Disney Plus and Hulu subscriptions and showing these corporations that we're going to stand up for what we believe. We're not going to just fall victim to what's being done to us. Things change.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to thank you for, I actually neglected to include the idea of cultural givens in my introduction. So I completely left that out. So thank you for putting that there. It's really, it's so important because our cultural givens, especially if we don't pay attention to them, we don't know we have them, they control us. What our parents gave us. If the world were exactly the way it was given to me, I could say some prayers that would decrease the amount of time I would spend in purgatory when I die. I was raised Catholic. The only, I like to joke, the only two cultural givens I received that held up were, one, that reading was a good thing to do because there are always books in my house. My mother made sure of that. And two, the Yankees were the greatest team in baseball history because they won more World Series than anybody else. And that one, based on that particular metric, the World Series wins, that still holds up. Not anything recently, unfortunately, but so much of the other stuff, the greatest country in the world, blah 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 blah. It just didn't include anything that was critical of the U.S. So what I'd like to do is just point to one other thing that I left out and give a current example of it. I want to thank Donald Trump and Stephen Miller for proving me right over and over again. I got to write them thank you notes. If they were poor, I'd send them money, but I'm not going to do that. The 9 elements, the 9 easily provable elements of the national shadow of the United States, something that you and I have spoken about a lot, but I'll just say them quickly here, are ignorance, arrogance, fear, bigotry, violence, greed, excess, bullying, and untrustworthiness. If you look back to actually pre-1776, it's even in the pre-United States, before the country was formed. If you look at the English, Irish, Spanish who came across, I didn't mean to pick on the Irish there, but the English, Spanish, Portuguese, and French who came across from Europe, they all carried those same elements with them in how they treated Africans, who they enslaved, and how they treated indigenous peoples of the Americas, and how they treated women who were also European. But this whole idea of group centrism and this unhealthy masculine and this ignorance, arrogance, fear, and bigotry. Stephen Miller, who might be running the White House now. I mean, he's a senior advisor to Donald Trump. He's not an elected official, but he's been, kind of a bigot and a white supremacist for years, and he's on the record saying all these things. He was investigated, and there's some detail on the Southern Poverty Law Center site. You can read all about him there. But at a recent event in Utah on September 21st, I'm just going to read his whole talk was about 6 minutes and 40 seconds. But I'll just give you a taste of some of the language he used in speaking about the Trump administration and MAGA Republicans against the rest of the American people, who, he thinks it's against the left, that the left are the enemy. And here's what he had to say. And this is all a quote from his speech. I recommend people go and view the speeches on YouTube. The light will defeat the dark. We will prevail over the forces of wickedness and evil. They cannot imagine what they have awakened. They cannot conceive of an army that they have arisen in all of us, because we stand for what is good, what is virtuous, and what is noble. It's almost hard to read these words or listen to him say them. And to those trying to incite violence against us, those trying to foment hatred against us, what do you have? You have nothing. You are nothing. You are wickedness. You are jealousy. You are envy. You are hatred. You are nothing. You can build nothing. You can produce nothing. You can create nothing. We are the ones who build. We are the ones who create. We are the ones who lift up humanity. We are on the side of God. And this is from a guy who has orchestrated the detention and deportation of brown-skinned people from the United States for the last 8.5 months, many of whom were American citizens and many of whom had done nothing wrong, and many of whom were here legally. And he's accusing the other people of being wicked and of being filled with hate. Now, I'm laughing as I say it because it's so ludicrous for those words to come out of his mouth. But that language, and I'm not speaking about killing 10 million people in Europe in the 1930s and 1940s. But that language is Hitleresque in terms of the type of language, the us versus them language that Hitler used, that Mussolini used, that Putin still uses, that Stalin used. It's, for anybody who's paying attention and knows history, it's very dangerous language. So that's from the man who basically orchestrates the desire to detain and deport 3,000 people from the United States a day. That's still going on, but it's not getting as much coverage because so many things are going on. As you said, the internet gave us all this information in fire hose or fire hydrant mode. The Trump administration violates laws and spews hatred in fire hose or fire hydrant mode as well. It's hard to keep track of it, and the best journalists are doing the best they can. So Stephen Miller's language is a perfect example of the 9 traits of American shadow, stuff we make believe isn't true about the United States. Again, is he ignorant of the dignity of each human being, or does he really know that it's true? He's just arrogant. He doesn't care. Is he afraid of people with different color skin than he has? Does he recognize that he's inciting violence against them? Is he getting paid well for this? Is he greedy? Is he somewhat of a bully? He's absolutely a bully with his language. And he's completely, well, in a way, he's trustworthy because you can trust he's going to continue to espouse this hateful language. But that's a great example of what we're talking about, of what has to be healed in this country, because he's embedded in us versus them language. And he thinks that brown-skinned people whose original language might have been Spanish, or people who might be inclined to believe in Islam as opposed to Christianity, that they are wicked and evil. And that's the language that he uses. So I'll stop there.
Well, thank you for pointing it out. What's interesting is that, and again, it's just, sometimes I tell people you really got to be careful about what you watch on YouTube, for the algorithm, because you train the algorithm to give you the recommendations. And I say that because of the fact that just yesterday, because what I watch, I make sure I actually created 2 different YouTube channels, because people send me videos and the videos that people send to me, if they're not in alignment with what I believe, then I have a separate YouTube channel I watch for those videos, so they don't get in my algorithm. And I don't get recommendations based off what they're sending me.
Okay.
So within that context, what I do watch and what I don't, I do want the algorithm to show me. Uh, I get some very interesting videos that come across my feed that I normally wouldn't get. And one is from a woman. Her YouTube channel is Life Take Two, and it's from a woman who's um, she's a white woman, identifies as a former white supremacist, was raised in a Mormon church her whole life. She's 51 years old now. Talks about how she left the Mormon church and the mega movement about 4 or 5 years ago. She gives a complete story about that. So her channel is interesting, watching her videos as how she's grown from that. But my point I'm bringing her to this conversation is because she actually analyzed Stephen Miller's speech. And she broke it down from being able to pull out certain key things that she says were coded in white supremacists, that only a white supremacist would be able to see the coding that he used, because those are the words they use within their internal conversations. And so, to your point of what he said, there are certain things I want to point out what she mentioned that he said in his speech. And this is not a quote, but these are some of the things he mentioned as a summary. He says, "The angels wept, but those tears have been turned into fire in our hearts, and that fire burns the righteous fury that our enemies cannot comprehend or understand." And she talks about how the key thing in there, the angels wept, is one of their key terms they use within the white supremacy movement, and that they understand that you're a hardcore Christian nationalist, that he's speaking your language when he says that, those words. And so it's important to really understand how that, and I used to have this conversation with people, and again, back when I was showing my growth that I have now, but when Trump first got in office, and my willingness to want to be right instead of do the right thing. I've learned that there's a big difference. Dr. Wayne Dyer talks about the difference between being right and doing the right thing. And in my ego time and wanting to be right, and just like I said, this was 2016 up to 2020, I would always just try to correct people and say, I don't believe Donald Trump was a racist, because my ego tells me that I'm a critical thinker and I can analyze things and I can point things out. So yeah, he's a con man. He's all these other things, but I don't think he was racist, right? So I was trying to make an argument with people to prove my point, pointing out to if he was racist, why we had these black friends, and you got people like George Wallace and examples, Bull O'Connor, they were racist, and he didn't seem to be that racist. But now that I've grown to where I am now, it doesn't matter. See, I realize that it doesn't matter defending whether he's racist or not. He's evil. And he definitely put a white supremacist racist in charge of his immigration policy. So that's racist by association for sure. And Stephen Miller, for him to be a strong white supremacist, what kills me, and it shows the media is complicit, the major media, I should say, is complicit with what's going on. How come he's never asked Stephen Miller during the interview, are you a white supremacist? He's never asked that question. Because I would love to hear him say he's not. And I don't think he would. I think he's so caught up in what he believes right now, his power, his authority, his superiority, and his belief that there's no consequences for his actions. I think he would come out and either not answer it, but I definitely don't think he would say, no, I'm not, for sure. And so for Trump to have that person and that power to come out and create policies and legislations and advice over such critical things, such as immigration, such as human rights, shows that even the argument was a silly argument to argue whether Trump was racist or not. And we get caught up in trying to determine whether somebody's racist or not, as though there's ever a collective agreement upon anything like that. Doesn't matter who wins that conversation. What people need to talk about is the behaviors that we see and what he does. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. I believe Stephen Miller is the one behind let's remove all the woke stuff from all the Smithsonian and the government websites. I don't think Trump cares about any of it, to be honest. But I believe that he listens to Stephen Miller because Stephen Miller tells him this is what your mega base wants. So while we do all these other things that we're not going to do for them, I should say, that are beneficial toward your 1% and your true allies, we got to give your base something they can chew on and keep them busy. It's like when you have dogs, you do things to keep your dogs busy so they don't come back and bite you or tear the house up. So you want to keep their mind stimulated. That's what I think Stephen Miller is there. His job is to stimulate the mega base, get them fodder, so to speak, to come out and say that, and have the Supreme Court even stamp it to say, in California, you have the right now in California to go out and basically racial profile and discriminate and choose to pull over and detain and question people just based off their skin color and based on their speaking Spanish. I mean, how blatantly racist can that possibly be? And for that to be actually the law and supported by the highest law of the land, to me shows that we are dealing and living in a corrupt system, because there's nothing just about that. If you're supposed to be Supreme Court justices, there's nothing just about saying that the whole population of people can be targeted for ICE for the cruelty of ICE, because ICE is not something that's just a, DMV, just some federal or DMV state, some federal organization or federal government organization that just kindly stops and questions you, which still would be a problem. But ICE is an evil, mean, violent organization that will slam you to the ground, put you in the worst prisons in America, and they have the right to just do that to anybody who the ICE agents determine. I think I heard Spanish, but as though most people, and I challenge people who, if you don't know Portuguese and you hear Spanish, a lot of those words are similar, and you won't be able to distinguish the two of those, especially someone who's not trained. And so you're going to put a person who can maybe wrong on thinking they heard Spanish, go out here and just grab somebody, or even they are speaking Spanish. I'm just saying that the idiocy of that law and that pretext that they can do that just really shows me where you are. And I believe all those policies come directly from Stephen Miller. And to sit here and see him with that kind of power, and Donald Trump giving him complete autonomy, authority just to create policy legislation like that, shows how evil and corrupt he is. And so lastly, I want to end this point with this. I was I wouldn't say shocked, but definitely disappointed when Jimmy Kimmel was removed. Because Jimmy Kimmel was like, I don't watch his whole show, but his monologue, I think I might share this before to you on the show. Of all the stand-up comedians, to me, he's the most, his comedy, his writing definitely stings the most at Trump's administration. He's definitely said some things that are just really quote-worthy, worth mentioning, and gives me that little last check before I go to bed at night, watching this YouTube clip. And when he got canceled, I was disappointed in that. And then, but again, what Trump didn't realize was that, and they didn't plan for it, because white supremacists are never really intelligent. They're just evil. They don't really play chess, thinking 7 moves ahead to see that, okay, if we do this, we're going to create a martyr out of Jimmy Kimmel. And that's what they did. And so now, in Trump's effort to say his low ratings and all that, his show was his putting the show back on air was the most ratings that he's ever received. And, and it was just funny how all that worked out. So having him back on the show, and he stung Trump. But I might make this point real quick. He was brilliant in the way his writing did, because even though it's not going to matter to the right, they're going to hate him anyway, and they're going to still talk about him. But what he did for those who might be in the middle, he made a point to say that he never intended to say anything wrong about a man being killed. And he even almost broke down talking about Charlie Kirk and went down with Charlie Kirk. And that Charlie Kirk's widow came out and even said she forgives the shooter, which was a total 180 from when she first came out. And she said, I'm going to follow his footsteps and all that. So it just shows humanity in her for her to say that. That she has all the reasons to hate, and they want to amplify her hate. They really wanted to make her the poster child of the new hate make her such a victim, but she refused to do that by saying, I forgive the shooter. So it just was really great to see that and see that backlash. And those are the little nuggets that makes me believe that, yeah, it's going to fall. It's just a matter of when and what brings it down. But there are still people out here who are still fully human.
Yeah, for sure. I just want one more piece on Miller too. In that speech, she actually goes back when he spoke about the former MAGA, former white supremacist woman who was, tying Miller's language to the white supremacist movement. He actually, in the speech, and this is just from my memory, he says, we are the descendants from Athens and from Rome. And then he hit one other city and he said, and Philadelphia. So in other words, we were the empire builders. We built this whole thing. We built the Western culture, the Western civilization. And we know what the founders wanted, because the founders obviously wanted a racist country. And it's this kind of apocalyptic, pure bigotry that, he just continues to get away with. And as you said, I wouldn't ask him if he's a white supremacist. I would ask him publicly if he believes in the supremacy of the white race. That's how I would phrase the question, because I don't like labels. I like behaviors and viewpoints. So, liberal, conservative, Republican, Democrat, all that stuff, it's almost meaningless because it depends on who's asking the question. If Bernie Sanders says, I think that person is too liberal, like my ears perk up because, or if Stephen Miller said, well, that's too far to the right, then I say, okay, I got to pay attention to this. But ask the specific question. Do you believe in the supremacy of the white race? And see what he has to say. Because he obviously does. I mean, he's been on the record of saying that for at least a decade now. And even when I think he was at Duke University, even there, he had that reputation. So here we are.
Yeah, so that's what I was saying. I definitely want to meet a challenge there. But what I want to do is take a break for our sponsor.
Yep.
Then we'll pick back up our conversation on the other side. So let's take a break for our sponsor right now.
The playbook for growing a local business online is simple. Capture new leads, conversationally convert those leads into sales, turn those customers into positive reviews, and then reactivate those customers into repeat buyers. And that's exactly what our platform does. In order to consistently generate new leads, you first need to be found. The quickest way to get search engines like Google to put your business at the top of search results is by having a steady flow of positive reviews. With our platform, you can show up in search and stand apart from your local competition by easily collecting new customer reviews through text. But getting found is only the beginning. Most consumers choose the first business that responds to them. So unless you start conversations with potential customers almost instantly, they'll go somewhere else. That's why we make starting conversations with website visitors as easy as clicking a button, connecting you instantly through text message so the conversation doesn't end when they leave your website. And we bring all your leads, no matter where they come from, into a single conversation stream that supports text, email, video messaging, Google Business Chats, and even Facebook and Instagram DMs, so you can respond faster and more efficiently than ever. When it comes to turning all those conversations into customers, we make collecting payments just another convenient part of the combo, so you get paid faster no matter how they prefer to pay. Next, you'll want to turn your new customers into happy reviews, which is a snap with our new review request quick actions. The more conversations and customers you generate, the easier it becomes to drive repeat business. We make reactivating contacts into customers as easy as, yup, you guessed it, the push of a button. With bulk actions, you can send out text and email campaigns to generate new sales whenever you have a new update, promotion, or story to tell. We make modern online marketing simple. Let's start growing your business today.
And we're back. Welcome to the Healing America's Narratives podcast. I'm your host, King, and I'm joined by my co-host, Reggie, and we're discussing the topic today that Reggie laid out, being the core shadow elements and dealing with our cultural givens. And we were talking about Stephen Miller. I know I kind of butchered your theme a little bit, but I just kind of want to summarize it as best of my memory, what I believe. I'll let you correct me in a second on that. But I just kind of want to piggyback up on this real quick, and I'll give you an opportunity to make another point in that respect. And that is, I was watching Marianne Williamson today on the video, and she was talking about how, kind of countries need to atone, America needs to atone, and our individual selves need to look at what we've done wrong. And she made a point, and I have to agree with that. She said that the left, the right always talks about how great America is and that America has done nothing wrong. And then the left always talks about all the wrong America's done, as though America's never done anything great. And so the medium is that both are right. America has done some historical atrocities, violence, subjugation, and marginalization toward communities of people, of course. But at the same time, America has also been a great place. I know that great people have come through America, has come as a result of America, jazz music, so those things. And as I've gotten older, I've tended to now look for what's positive, because again, it's not about trying to convince everybody else to be positive for the sake of just being positive, but it is for my own mental well-being that shows me that the world in this country I live in is not hell. It has elements and behaves like hell sometimes based on some of the leaders. And yeah, it definitely can be a lot better. But by the same token, it has been a country where, had it not been for the things we've gone through, and I'm not condoning it saying it was right, but because of the atrocities we've lived through, what I see as my old identity of being a Black man was created as a result of that. And I'm proud of that. But at the same token, in my path to be more fully human, I'm proud that whether things happen again, for the problems and challenges of my life, wisdom is gained through that. So I just want to add that point.
Yeah, no, it's a really important point. In fact, that reflects this past Sunday. I spent a couple hours at the United Church of Christ in Southbury, Connecticut. I was invited to come in and speak during their service for about 5 to 8 minutes, because we're going to try to run a Healing America's Narratives course there beginning next month. And the pastor, really good guy, invited me to come in. And afterwards, there was kind of a meet and greet, which they do every week, not just when I'm there. And one gentleman come up to me, definitely in his 60s, maybe in his 70s. And he said, how do you, based on my 8 minutes of, what the course was going to be like, how do you balance this idea of shadow with American exceptionalism? So what I always do, there's certain phrases when people use them, like I'll never answer the question until I get some clarity. So I said, well, when you say American exceptionalism, what do you mean when you say that word? I said, I have an understanding of it. What do you mean? So he was willing to, to play a little bit. And he said, well, this is all the good that America has done, and, blah, 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 blah. And he was pretty clear, and I agreed with him. I said, yeah, so my goal is for America to really live up to its promise. And the only way we can do that, this is true for individual humans who are dealing with shadow, it's true for a nation. The only way we can do that is to honor what in fact is exceptional. The American experiment is exceptional, no doubt about it. And to also recognize, own, and integrate all that's not exceptional about it. Some of the things that we've done have been truly evil. And until we are able to recognize both of those and integrate them, we will not be whole. And so, that's a longer way of kind of saying what I think you just said. And he really embraced that. I don't know his name, so I don't know if he's going to sign up for the course or not. but it was, it's so very clear because what you and I are speaking about, the idea of healing America's narratives and looking at shadow, we're not saying that America is an evil place and that all it is this darkness. That's not what shadow means anyway. We're saying both of these things are true, and the vast majority of Americans don't recognize, own, and integrate the shadow part. They make believe it's not there. And until we together recognize all of this and we stop trying to use the perfect expression in Florida and Texas and other states now, all the whitewashing history, including in the Navy Library, including in the Smithsonian museums. We're trying to get rid of the history that we don't like. And that's what every autocratic dictator, every autocratic leader, historically, anywhere in the world has always done. Get rid of the stuff that makes us look bad and make believe that everything we do is great. Yeah.
Well, I would say, as we begin to start shifting and transitioning to our last few segments of our show, I'm probably saying my last take that I'm going to throw in there again is really stressing the importance of this work of being fully human. Like you intentionally chose as, I guess, is your subtitle, Becoming More Fully Human. And that's what we have here on the podcast graphic, and how important it is for your own mental sanity. Again, my cultural givens I grew up was, again, identified as a Black man. I don't knock folks, they didn't know any better at that time, and the importance of why you shouldn't do that. And I believe I needed that at that time to at least grow up with some form of pride, because I didn't see it from TV. And so, and then read it from the history books and wasn't getting it in schools. So having that racial pride was the only thing that was giving me some form of purpose in life. And then, of course, reading Malcolm X's book helped put me on a path of understanding that I have to have a purpose in life in order to be fulfilled. Because before that, I didn't even know that there was such thing as even finding a purpose. It was just you just living and trying to make every day better than the last day, and hoping it doesn't get too bad. And that's the kind of existence that we were living under. But I say all that to say is I listen to people's conversations now when I'm watching videos or I'm in conversation with people who are not interested or haven't yet learned the importance of becoming fully human, who are not on that journey. And I see how unhappy they are with their lives and unhappy they are with the world. And they constantly let themselves be fed all this negative news that's coming from, whether it's the media, whether it's influencers, whether it's the music they're listening to, whether it's TV shows they're watching, or whatever it may be. And they don't realize that it's the food they're feeding themselves mentally that's keeping them unhappy. And then that eventually leads to health issues. So that's why I just want to end my segment on today's show by saying that I really want to stress the importance that become more fully human is not just trying to make nice words just for the sake of saying them, but it really helps condition you to have a much better life. And if you don't have a better life, you inevitably become more fully human in that context.
Yeah, well said. I don't really have anything to add to that. So if it's all right with you, I might just go into the offering of what we might be able to do moving forward, based on the specifics of today's conversation. And this is not, for anybody who's been listening to us, this is not going to be particularly new, but it's like the pastor or the preacher who repeats the same sermon over and over again, and the parishioner comes up and says, you already said that, like the last 3 weeks. He says, yeah, and I'm going to keep saying it till somebody listens. So when somebody in a position of power speaks and says things, whether you agree with them or you don't agree with them, ask yourself, is that true? Is it true? So when Stephen Miller says he's pointing to some imaginary people in his mind. You are wickedness, you are hatred, you are this, and we are the builders, we are the producers, we are on the side of God. The question that each of us has to ask is, what that man just said true? And whether I say yes it is, or I say no it's not, what is the evidence for my taking that position that it is true or it's not true? And then go find the evidence. In the absence of that, in fact, the woman that I'm going to hold up as my example of somebody who's fully human, and I'm not going to say her name yet, but she has a statement that is something like this: in the absence of facts, we can't know the truth. In the absence of truth, we can't know how to interact with each other. So we need facts in order to know the truth. No, we can't know how to trust each other. We won't be able to trust each other in the absence of facts and truth. So it's important to do the work of finding out. And social media, unfiltered social media, is not the place to try to find truth, unless you're willing to check, hear something, read something, and then fact check it against other sources. You have to do the work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And now, as we move into our last segment of the show, we will talk about identifying someone that we want to give flowers to, that we believe exhibit the qualities and the characteristics of being fully human, either from the past or from the present, to show that this is not some kumbaya type of philosophy that we're doing. And the person I want to lift up and give flowers to today is Norman Lear. And Norman Lear was a groundbreaking American television writer and producer, as folks know, best known for the shows All in the Family, Jeffersons, Good Times, Maude, Sanford and Sons. And a lot of those shows were extremely instrumental in influencing me at an early age. And watching Good Times, the Jeffersons were two of my favorite, and Sanford and Sons. They were my favorite shows coming up, and still are. I still love watching them. I learned a lot from those shows. Just seeing those type of characters you don't see anymore on those shows. And he was able to tap into talking about tough political issues and still bring humor to it, which to me is a skill, it's an art, and he was able to do that. And so I just really quickly say that, again, I use 6 pillars to determine what I feel a person is being fully human. And so within that, I'll say his identity, strong values led identity, grounded in dignity and pluralism, growth mindset. He was a persistent leader who iterates boldly, reframes setbacks, higher purpose and service, clear why. He had a clear why, centered on elevating social discourse. His core principles: consistently advocated for free expression, inclusion, and democratic norms. He had a grateful spirit, publicly modeled gratitude and credits with his collaborators. And then finally, self-awareness, meta-awareness of influence and legacy. So again, Norman Lear is who I want to lift up today.
Yeah, beautiful. I actually grew up with All in the Family. I'm a little bit older than you. And that show was on when I was in my teens. I'd have to check exactly how old I was. But yeah, Norman Lear, a true talent. So I'm going to mention and give a nod to Maria Ressa, who is a Philippine journalist who won the 2021 Nobel Peace Prize. She was jailed. There were warrants for arrest, I think, 12 times back in the 1990s. The 20 teens. And she ended up spending some time in jail and continued to fight against, the dictatorship that she was writing and speaking out against. And for her efforts, won the 2021 Nobel Peace Prize. She has surfaced again and again because she continues to speak out against what's happening in the United States. Donald Trump would like to be like the dictator who jailed Maria Ressa, Interestingly, that dictator whose name I forget right now, he's now in jail in The Hague awaiting a trial for war crimes. So she seems to be winning this particular journalist versus dictator competition, but she did the Harvard University commencement address in 2024. She's spoken a variety of places, and she's speaking out more and more now. In fact, she spoke in the last 3 days at the UN. So Maria Ressa, a Philippine journalist, and she has her own news organization now, and I think it's like Rambler or Rattler. I forget the name of it. So, but if you find Maria Ressa, you'll find out, what she's been up to. But a courageous, honest woman, and she's got a pretty good sense of humor to boot.
Excellent. We're going to get ready to wrap up today's show. Again, thank you, Reggie. One more thing I wanted to add real quick. I know we're kind of going over 1 minute. You don't give me grace on this. I just want to point this out. You mentioned All in the Family. I didn't mention All in the Family as my shows that are favorite shows from Norman Lear. And that was because I didn't really watch it as a kid, but I'm watching it now. And I will say that Archie was always told to me he was a bigot, he was racist and all those things. And he was a bigot, but watching the show, he wasn't racist. There's episodes on the show where he actually let Lionel stay with him over his house. He accepted food. He helped, he supported George's business, a black business, cleaning business. So those not things that were racist. So my point is Norman Lear was masterful and even showing how a bigot can be human in those respects. He still saw, as bigoted as Archie was, he still saw humanity in other people. He might not like them, but he actually saw humanity in them. I just want to make that last little point. Yeah. So as we wrap up today's show, again, Reggie, thank you for choosing a wonderful topic. Listening audience, thank you for listening, whether you're listening live or you're watching and listening as a replay. And to next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, let's all continue to look for ways to heal America's narratives and become more fully human. Thank you.